Great. Well, listen, thank you very much. First of all, thank you to our panelists for joining today, and thank you for everyone online. We, of course, are being streamed through Big Blue Button as well as on YouTube. So I just want to say this is the very first Big Blue Button World Congress or World Conference, and certainly won't be the last. And this is the day that is part of a 4-day conference. This is the day dedicated to educators. And this first session, I think, is the perfect lead off in terms of our main panel discussions, because if you have children that are in school and been experiencing online learning over the last year, or if you're a teacher, this has been one of the biggest issues that we have been hearing about. It's this idea of how do we create, if technology and teaching are not going away, what this year has taught us is that it is certainly a new dimension, taking people out of the live classroom and into a virtual environment. So this idea of creating engagement in the new classroom and what lessons we've learned, I think, is so vitally important. So first of all, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First up is, I'd like to introduce Tia Andrighetti, who's an associate professor, innovation coach, and simulation coordinator at Frontier Nursing University. And I'll just say that I had the pleasure of speaking with Tia back a couple of months ago. And remarkably, as a nursing university, of course, you're dealing with very hands-on experience in a typical classroom. So I know that your organization has faced particular challenges when it comes to teaching. And Tia is joined today by Amin Atafi, who's an English teacher with Mideast. He's based in Tunisia. Just say a little bit about Mideast, a remarkable organization. It's a U.S. nonprofit that supports approximately 60,000 students across the Middle East and North Africa, with the goal of strengthening mutual understanding and cooperation between Americans and people of the Middle East and North Africa. And again, fascinating, both ends of the world, both very, very different backgrounds, with Amin being an English teacher and has been a teacher now for 16 years. I think it'll be very, very interesting to hear from our two experienced panelists today. So thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, I just want to encourage everybody who's online, please. I know that some of you, there's a lot of teachers online and many parents. This is an amazing opportunity for you guys to ask questions. So please post your questions in chat, and likewise do the same again through YouTube if you're live streaming through there. So I'm just going to kick off. I'll be asking you some questions today just to get the discussion started. So first up, obviously, I mean, if you talk to Fred, who's one of the co-founders of Big Blue Button, you know, that technology, this idea for Big Blue Button came out of a university. And clearly at the time, back in 2008, you know, the introduction, the use of video conferencing within the classroom, or as an alternative to the classroom, was a fairly slow and steady process. But then 15 months ago, the whole world went online. And we know that 1 billion students virtually overnight went online. And so can you talk, first of all, about what it was like from your perspectives to first orient yourself as a teacher, and then how did you orient your students to this new reality of learning online once the shutdowns happened? What were the experiences that you came across that best enabled students to get into a routine? Tia, do you want to start us off?
You know what? I'm fine to do that, but we have always taught online. So I thought maybe you want to have Amin start, and then I can talk about kind of our experience with it too, because it's going to be a little different. We did not do it overnight. So.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. So,
yeah, so it all started, you know, as a teacher, I have taught online since 2007 using some platforms that I can't mention here, of course. But with the advent of the pandemic and the lockdowns, I found myself ready to switch to online teaching, but my students were not ready. Mideast provided us with in-house training and made sure we mastered the online teaching tools. The students, as I had said earlier, weren't ready at all. And for them, it was a bit hazy as an alternative to in-person lessons. So first, I had to make them familiar with the BBB tools, and then I had to convert the in-person lessons plans to online lessons. And I came across some difficulties at first, such as explaining how it all works and how to use the tools and breakout rooms, some fun consuming activities. The online lessons started with a slow rhythm, but as soon as collaboration and interaction took place through modeling and guidance, the students got again on the right track of learning, and the new routine was established. You see, so it was a kind of radical change or direct change. It was not pilot, it was not phased, it was out of the blue. We had the pandemic and we had to adapt ourselves to the new reality.
So how long, I'm curious actually, first of all, within the culture of the teaching community, how long did and how openly embraced, I guess there was no choice for teachers, they had to get with the program, but how long did it take your colleagues to basically become familiar and comfortable with this shift from a virtual or a physical to a virtual classroom setting?
1 month. At Amid East, we had training, in-house training, and those who knew how to teach online helped the others, and we had also professionals, and we allocated time and everything, and we even taught each other, we simulated, we had, modeling, and we attended each other's classes as students and teachers. So we prepared ourselves well, before starting or shifting online.
And
no, sorry, Tia, go ahead. I was about to go.
I was going to just say that ours was because maybe it was a little bit more of a gradual rollout when we first started using BigBlueButton, which we were using well before the pandemic. We had, and because most of our program is online, we do obviously do some in person, and that was very, very hard to do during the pandemic. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I would say overall, we did a 1 hour basic training. And then it's really, I help faculty just kind of learn how to use the technology on one-on-one sessions for what they want to use. And it was a very short transition for us. So I think it probably also depends on how quickly you're having to transition as to how long the training takes too.
Now, you said that your organization was already doing a lot of online learning. What percentage of your programs or what percentage of the curriculum was being delivered online?
So our program, we are a graduate nursing school here in the United States. We only train people who are already nurses to be advanced practice nurses. And that is the extent of our university. It's, it's small in that way. Our students do all of their didactic learning ahead of time and then do all of their clinicals at the end. So basically what we say is that they spend the majority, all of their didactic learning is done virtually. Their hands-on learning, they're done on campus and then in their home communities. So that's kind of the motto of our school, is to keep students in their home communities. And so, for instance, I live in New Hampshire. This school is in Kentucky, and the faculty and students are around the country as well as around the world, to be honest with you. And so that is the benefit of that. But all of our didactic classes are delivered online.
I want to come back. That's interesting because you've cultivated or you have a culture of online learning. And I think there's a lot that people can learn from you. But I just want to, first of all, I'd like to introduce a new panelist who has just joined us. Dr. Manal Jabri is an English language program teacher as well with Amid East. And she's based in Tunisia and has been teaching English for the past 6 years. So welcome, Manal. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hello. I just want to start by the doctor thing. I'm not a PhD holder. I have an MA and bachelor's degree, but I have just corrected that with Jess earlier. So Thank you for having us. And I can see my dear colleague here. I can see Amin. Hi, Tia, also.
Hello.
I'm sorry to interrupt everybody. I just had some problems logging in.
That's quite all right. So welcome.
Thank you.
So the research has shown that there were, in fact, our next presentation goes specifically into this, but the research has shown that there was a lot of kids that have struggled, but there were certain kinds of kids that actually prospered as a result of online learning. So I'm really curious to hear from all of you, because you have very different experiences, because of course, Amanda and Manel, you've had to actually transition to online, whereas Tia, her program was delivered online. I'm really curious to find out what are the characteristics of those students who actually did well with online learning over the last year? How would you describe what made them different than their peers? Or Tia, in your case, obviously, if one accepts going to your college, they've got to be willing to do online learning. So what does it take for a student to be successful in this new environment, to be engaged and to get the full experience out of it?
Well, I can just go ahead and jump in there to say that, first of all, as faculty, we should make no assumptions about our learners. We have, in our program, they're all adults, so that's different than somebody who has children. But we made some very big assumptions that the digital natives, the younger generation of our students would be very comfortable with online learning and online platforms. And what we have found is they're comfortable with some parts of it and not comfortable with all parts of it. So don't make any assumptions about your learners, depending on their age. Some of our most successful students have been some of our older students, and the ones who have acclimated better to this system. I will also say that it takes a lot of self-motivation, and I think that would transcend the ages and what you're teaching. And I think that's why it's so hard for some learners to be engaged in a virtual environment, because you're not physically there, you're not physically with the teacher, they're not keeping you on task. And so keeping them engaged with some of the other creative things that I'm sure we're going to be talking about today will be ways that I think can help them be successful. But I think if they also are intrinsically very motivated, that of course helps too.
Now, yeah, that is, I'm sitting here, I was saying the earlier presentation that I'm sitting here with 3 of my own kids upstairs doing virtual learning. And I can tell you, it is a case study in terms of the variations of how students learn. So, Amin and Manel, how old are the students that you're teaching?
As for me, it's from the cradle to the grave. I'm teaching at the public sector and the private sector as well. I'm teaching extra hours at Amid East, and I'm teaching at the National Engineering School of Bizerta. So I'm teaching engineers, young adults, kids, professionals.
Oh, wow.
I'm a hands-on teacher. I believe in practice, not in theory. I take the theory from the practice, you see.
Do you teach the full range?
Can I go ahead?
Yeah, of course, please.
All right. So I have real diversity. I have the young learners, preteens and teens, and I have the young adults between the age of 16 and 19, and then I have the adults. The adults, we have the professionals, like the business English. I'm teaching currently the Central Bank of Tunisia, and we have the insurance companies, and we have the general English adults. About the characteristic, can I say something? So I observed 2 types of characteristics of students willing to go online. There were the students of the first lockdown, which was last year during April and May. So these students were mainly driven by curiosity. They really wanted to see how is it going to be. And most of them, they were returning students of Amethyst. So they have been there for more than 2 or 3 sessions. And then during the lockdown, it was a real general lockdown. Nobody was getting out of their houses for more than, started March 15. And I think that it ended May 25 or something like that. So people were at home. They didn't have much to do. Plus, they were supposed to finish their studies because some of them are willing to take the international tests or to travel. So it was like the perfect opportunity to get to know, first, it was the curiosity. Second, some of these students, I mean, the first classes I had, and I think I had the first online class of Amethyst, and it was with Zoom, not BBB. And the first class was really good and literate when it comes to using the, online features of the classroom. Then after that, we got back to face-to-face classes, and then we had the second wave of the pandemic, and then the second lockdown. And meanwhile, even when we were back face-to-face, we were having like the hybrid classes. I mean, I can be teaching the morning, the face-to-face classes, and then during the evening, I would be having the online class. So the second group of students, they were more of this is part of our lives now, and we're going to do it, whether we're comfortable doing it or not. So after that, it was like more of, after the first wave, we lost a lot of time doing nothing. We should have been doing our classes. So now we should be taking this seriously and start to get to know the gist of it. And actually, the second wave, or the second group of students, after I think September 2020, they were more hard working into learning more about the platform. And I think that at that point, we moved to the BBB. During September, I think, September, we started using the BBB. That's I think what I wanted to say. I don't know if it makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. I remember I spoke to a school administrator in the U.S. There's about 30,000 kids in that region, and I asked this person, what was the biggest surprise they faced? And this person was actually head of technology for this school region. So the biggest surprise they faced was the number of kids who actually don't have access to technology. And I'm just really curious from that perspective. I mean, I guess, Tia, in your circumstance, if someone's going to join your program, then they need to have that technology already in place. But how, I'm curious now, what did you face that problem within your region in terms of kids simply not having the technology, the requisite technology to actually be engaged in education?
Yeah, it is a huge, oh, sorry, Manal, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you could go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I completely agree. There is not the infrastructure in many of our rural areas of this country to allow for high-speed internet. And it's surprising in today's day and age. Our school's focus is rural and underserved areas. And our hope is that we train healthcare providers to stay in these rural and underserved areas, because we're not bringing them to a campus to go to school. But that is a day-to-day challenge with us. There are many platforms. There are many online simulations. So you heard one of my titles is the simulation coordinator. There are a lot of things that we could use with our learners, but not if they don't have a high enough speed internet or access to the resources. And I think one of the things, Robert, that was so amazing for all of us to realize is there are children who don't have not only, the access to the internet, but also the computers in which to be, if you have 3 different children, do you need 3 different computers for them to be on the computer at the same time of day, at the same time? And, and if you work online, how much bandwidth is each household taking? And I think that was a huge thing for us to learn as a nation, well, as a world, because I'm sure it's not any different in Tunisia than it is here, that how difficult that can be. And so then you have to prioritize, I think, is the key of what you're doing and how you do it.
Tia, I think it's even more difficult here because already we're suffering from, the internet connection problems, and not every family is providing or could provide their kids with the equipment to get to their online classes. And I had like siblings using the same computer, and sometimes they are not able to use their microphone, or they're not able to use their camera. And it's a bit shocking because I see these kids, especially I'm talking about my young adult classes. These kids have like iPhone 13 and iPhone 12, and you see them always, using the social media. You would expect them to be using the internet connection and using the equipment for the online classes better than some of the adults, because you have already talked about age, but I'm not talking about age, but I'm talking of how much time they spend using their screens. But when it comes to the classroom, it's way more difficult. Also, here I'm based in the capital city of Tunisia. The internet is relatively better than other areas. So I think maybe my colleagues in Sousse would have more problems than I had. And I'm talking about, the best spot for the internet connection is Tunis downtown. So it's not only the connection, but also the equipment. And also I have to add something. We are providing English language training, and the students that we have, they come from special or specific social class. This social class is, it's the middle social class. It's not like pretty rich, and they are not like families in need. So I was expecting them to, each of the kids to have their own PCs, especially that they need them for their studies, not only for their online classes. And it turns out, no, it's not what I expected. This was, until last week, I have just finished one online class for the young adults. And some of them would be using the same computer as Tia was saying, or they would be absent just because they couldn't have a proper Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah, let me just add something. I've just been cut off because of the DSL connection, although I have a high-speed internet, up to 20 mega, which is good in Tunisia. I had to shift to 4G connection. So for my students, I always tell them to prepare contingency plans. When the worst comes to the worst, you can shift to 4G or 3G, or having a dongle Wi-Fi or something like that, or using your neighbor's Wi-Fi code or whatever. You see, so contingency plans are good. Yeah.
Yeah, even some of them, they told me, I'm sorry to interrupt, they told me that they would go to their relative houses to just be able to attend their class, their online class. So this happens, for one of my students every week, she needs to go to her cousin's house, so she would be able to attend the classroom.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear from people that are watching online. I'd love to see in the chat, organizationally, how many of your schools were caught off guard in terms of the lack of technology or technical ability on the part of students? How many were surprised by that? I'd love to know.
I think all public sector schools were not able to have the online classes, or they struggled. Maybe the higher education, public higher education, had only 20 or 30% of their students using the online classes. And I think would have more infos when it comes to the higher public education.
Do you know, it is that point I was asking about. It's interesting because I think it's easy for people to be to assume that everyone has got easy and equal access to technology, and I think that was very surprising. This particular school district, I won't mention who they are, but they are literally on the doorstep of Silicon Valley, and you've got upwards of a third to a half kids that don't even have access to the internet, and they're in Silicon Valley, and sort of they're very close to Silicon Valley. So you can imagine what it's like if you're, in Kentucky or you're in Tunisia. It's even further away from the heartland of technology. It's quite remarkable. So next, another thread I'd like to talk about is a little bit about, the theme here is about engagement. And clearly, in a classic setting, in a classroom, you've got students of different abilities. I'm just wondering what you can tell us, or what your thoughts are, what your experiences are in terms of the challenges you faced in managing students at those different levels, and what it took to keep students at different levels engaged.
Yeah, so let me answer this question. Some students struggled, in a mixed ability class. You have some the weakest, average, and the best, you see. So those who struggled were the passive or silent learners. And although some of them mastered using the BBB tools, they were a bit reluctant to participate or turn on their cams. So I had to do my best as a teacher to dislodge them out from their cocoons and involve them in the classroom activities. Those who prospered were the same active members in the classroom, you see. So they adapted quickly to the new technology and situation, and they had propensity to share knowledge and to take the initiative. And as a teacher, I used those, prosperous, let's say, students to motivate those who struggled, to help out. That's cooperative learning,
I would add something else to what Amin was saying. Some of my students were more focused on getting to be better at choosing the online platform itself than focusing on using the language. And that was, such a problem. Some of them that would be intimidated because they are not feeling comfortable using the platform, that they would be reluctant to use the language. And that was a problem. Also, this is for the young adults classes. For the adult classes, some of my students were, and I remember this one student, she would send me an email before the classroom saying, I'm pretty self-conscious. I don't want to have my camera on. And I'm really sorry about that. And I'm not supposed to have my students without their cameras on, and sometimes I just say, okay, I can understand, and she would say that would trigger my anxiety or my social anxiety. So this also was a problem not only for young adults or teenagers, but also for adults.
Do just as a quick follow-up to my last point, we've had people comment from Canada, from Germany, from Holland, Jamaica, India, and consistent across the board is how challenging it was for kids to have access to technology and regular, reliable internet. So, quite remarkable, because our keynote speaker, is obviously somebody that is a huge advocate for the role of technology in education. I'm really fascinated because he's like, well, get used to it because it's not going anywhere, and certainly technology isn't going anywhere, but it is a significant issue when you think about, and again, I'll speak from the perspective of a parent. I've got a 15-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 7-year-old. One of my kids is developmentally delayed. These are kids that are all over the map in terms of their capacity to focus, the ability to learn. Even within a classroom, there's a challenge there. So going back to that question about engagement, Tia, what have your experiences been like in working with students at different levels through this interface?
So what I would say is we've tried to be very, very thoughtful in how we get them in there. So we have them join early and have our IT department there to help troubleshoot any camera and microphone issues and any connectivity issues. We give them guidance on shutting down their computers the night before to make sure that when they turn it on, all of the updates have happened, since that can interfere sometimes with the interface. We have tried to help those students who are as Manel was talking about, who are more anxious about being on camera and trying to, so we're very big proponents of using evidence-based to train healthcare providers. We want them to use what the evidence is that says this is the best way to treat your health condition. And so we try to use the best evidence for teaching and learning. And that is very interactive. So trying to encourage them to keep their cameras on, because whether you like it or not, you are more interactive if your camera's on. I also highly encourage, and if you'll notice, I've tried to model this today, I don't turn off my microphone. We encourage them to keep their microphones unmuted. So obviously that can't happen everywhere if there's dogs barking or kids running around in the background, but keep your microphones unmuted so that it's easier to have a dialogue that's more similar to if you were in person. I also think that there is a tremendous amount we can do with, the capability of breakout rooms and things like that to make them feel more comfortable working in smaller groups and interacting. And I think that helps engage them and stimulate them. I'm thinking of those of you who teach in the K through 12 age range. How do you keep 7-year-olds busy for an hour? You have to keep them moving. You have to keep them engaged with doing different things. You can't just sit there and have a lecture, nor is that best practices with teaching and learning pedagogy either, to just lecture to them for an hour. It's better to have them read something, practice something, and then come and work it through during the interactive session. That's going to keep them more engaged, and I think that's going to help them stay on task.
One of the remarkable things that we got in our research was, and I, just to pick up something that Kat Foster, who's watching this today, brought up, was that one of the reasons why they needed to accommodate, this particular school district needed to accommodate having the cameras turned off, was because the number of kids that are homeless, that are living in shelters. I'm sorry to come back to it again, but I find it, I'm a teacher, and I when I work around technology as a professional, certainly not a profession, like I'm not an IT expert, believe me, but I do find it quite amazing that there are certain assumptions that we've made incorrectly about the way people lived. And I think that what's interesting about this is we're probably seeing something that's closer to the truth. And I'll be really curious to see how this kind of awareness of the way that we live and the way that we learn, how it may change us as teachers going forward.
It was definitely a reason. My daughter was a senior in high school over this last year, and it was definitely they encouraged them to have their cameras on, but they could not require it because of that reason, Robert, because of the disparities that people have and forcing them to show that. And I absolutely get that. I always come at it from it really will help keep you engaged and help you learn a lot more if you can.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bigger issue here, and unfortunately we only have 45 minutes to talk about it, but the keynote speaker was very much about, the fact is, like, he's embracing technology. But when you've got so many kids that either don't have any access, or limited access, I mean, unless we're going to move everybody to Toronto or to where I'm in Ottawa, Canada, unless we're all going to move them to urban centers where they've got ready access to technology and we put computers in everybody's hands, it's hard to look forward with 100% optimism, knowing that some of these gaps exist in people's access to technology. Now, to segue, when we were doing this research for this panel, one of the things that we came across was the number of teachers that have had to be incredibly creative in accommodating students with some of these circumstances that you talk about. Basically that these teachers had to really pivot to accommodate students with those circumstances, and where their learning progression, where they found kids were really falling behind or weren't engaged, they stepped outside of their own homes to go and engage the student directly in some way. And I'm just curious, What are some of the lessons that you've seen or you've come across for having creative approaches to engagement with students?
Yeah, so let me here answer the question. I want to share my screen and show you some screenshots from Amelie's, BBB lessons, and I will show you some instances and examples of creativity. Now I did my best, so let me see. So here we got.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're not able to see your screen, Amin. I don't know if one of the administrators can help with that.
No, it's coming. It's coming. Just hang on a sec. That's a contingency.
I mean, you have to. The person who was presenting before you has to stop sharing, so you could go ahead and start sharing yours.
Okay, hang on a sec. So, can you see my screen now?
You are the presenter, but it's not coming through.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And let's give it.
Whilst you're working on that, I mean, there's a couple of great comments here. Is that, somebody, Saket Foster again, so the root problem is the same as in a physical face-to-face school. But the issue of and Adam Harper asked, so right, but why are they not engaged? What causes that lack of engagement?
The lack of engagement.
Yeah, and then Nanda Lewin asked, so maybe as simple as not being interested in the topic. I'll say that our keynote speaker talked about this, saying, look, and I'm paraphrasing here, is that you take an analog method of teaching, you put it into a digital environment. And as I observed, as the father of 3 young kids, my kids can basically spend 24 hours a day connected to a screen. But for some reason, when it comes to paying attention to their classwork, they lose focus after about 5 minutes. One of my kids anyway. So what the keynote was suggesting is that for this to be successful, we have to reshape the way that we are teaching and the nature of what we're delivering online. You can't use an analog approach to a digital environment.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. I would say that you can't just take the same lecture that you did in person and deliver it this way. You need to be creative of how you help them interact. And that's where I think, using the breakout room. So meeting together, then sending them to a breakout room to work on a project, coming back, reporting on it, have just like you may have done in person in the small group discussions, but that's going to be way more effective using problem-based learning, using active teaching instead of just delivering the lecture method. Because Robert, my guess is your kids are not 24 hours on the screen watching lectures. They're interacting with some game or some process in that way and getting feedback. So they're getting to a new level. They're getting a badge. They're getting something that shows, hey, you're trying and you're working through it. And we have to take some of those gaming principles of how we reward, and I'm using my little quotation fingers there, but how we reward students to show them that they're achieving their goals.
And
actually, sorry, Robert. I've went through a training that prepares you for the online classes. So I'm not choosing the regular class planning or class preparing and designing the course as the one that I use for the online class. It's not the same thing. So I took training for 2 months to prepare myself as a teacher first to be aware of the no kids can be sitting for 2 hours doing nothing as just answering 1 or 2 questions that you would ask them. So for example, I would first start by personalizing my class. I would start by first writing the quote of the day. That's the first thing that I would see on the whiteboard of the platform, and then I would be I would try to find a quote that would be related to the lesson I'm doing or something like that, or I would break their focus for a moment, asking them to go around their room or house and bring something that is red or that is round, or I don't know. So that would make them be more doing some physical activities and not to feel like they are chained to their screen and their chair. That's something. Also, I want to comment on this, the one message in the public chat that says it's the same problems as the face-to-face classes. I don't think so. I think that the face-to-face classes would be more of not discriminating. I don't like to use the word discriminating, but it's discriminating when it comes to one of the students that has every equipment there and has the Wi-Fi connection, and it's most of the time 2 or 3 of them, and the rest of them, which are 10, are not able to hear me because of their connection problems, or they are not able to speak their minds, and sometimes they have to answer just using the public chat or something like that. So it's less discriminating, and it would feel more of inclusive. No matter your background, I mean, whether you are, as Robert was saying, in the shelters or at home. So that's what I was trying to say. Thank you.
Yeah, just I want to share. I couldn't share my.
I mean, can I just stop you there? I need to move on to moderate the next session. However, if our panelists are willing, there are a lot of comments, some great comments, and some questions that are coming up in the chat. So if our panelists are willing to stay, I'm going to leave the group, but please, by all means, continue discussion. I think it's vitally important. But I also want to say, though, our next panel discussion is called A Thriving Minority, What Students with Special Needs Can Teach Us About Successful Remote Learning. So we will be continuing something along the conversation, but if you'd like to stay and the panelists are willing, by all means, please do stay in this breakout room. Thank you very much, panelists. It's been a great session. I really appreciate it. Thank you.